et j'ai grandi et dehors de Toronto. La première équipe que je applaudais était le Montréal Canadien. And for all the people that don't speak French as fluently as I do, I just said, go Montreal. So today I simply want to relate to you two quotes. The first is a quote from a grade 12 student who actually suffers from Prader-Willi syndrome. And the second quote is actually my favorite French quote. So my wife will tell you that I only know one French quote. So by default, it's actually my favorite. But before we get there, let's start with the quote from a grade 12 student dealing with Prader-Willi syndrome. And he writes, "Imagine that you are in a concentration camp. Imagine that every day you are denied the opportunity to eat. And when you do, you are only given very little. So little that it is insufficient to feel any little bit of satisfaction. This feeling only leaves you with a greater impulsion to eat again. Pretend that you are denied access to food so regularly that it impels you to look for, or find, or better yet, consume food instantly. Pretend that you are restricted food so often that it makes you dream or think about food constantly. Food has now become the main focus in your mind, and you will manipulate anything you can in order to find ways to gain access to food. In a way, I am a prisoner of hunger." Jacob Zavitz, a grade 12 student with Prader-Willi syndrome. Now, unfortunately, this isn't a unique story. See, I can tell you a story about my 7-year-old son, Dante, and how I left the kitchen for 2 minutes and he ran in and drank half a bottle of cod liver oil. I can tell you stories of a 22-year-old who stole and sold all of his mom's jewelry in order to get money to buy food. I can tell you of an 8-year-old who went to school and ended up hitting his special needs teacher, but because of the strict laws in that state, the police actually showed up and arrested him for assault. But I can also go on and tell you stories of children who have died in their sleep overnight because their body couldn't mount a defense to a common cold. Or children who at Christmas have ran away into the corner and stuffed food down their throats so quickly so that their parents wouldn't find them that they died choking. You see, this is the challenge that we face as a Prader-Willi syndrome community. So as you saw a little bit earlier, we started the foundation, and the mission of our foundation is to eliminate these challenges of Prader-Willi syndrome through research. Eliminate these challenges through research. But when you're faced with such daunting challenges as the ones that we talked about and we saw in the videos, where do you start? Or what do you do? So the answer to that is actually my favorite French quote. And it goes, "Petit à petit, leçon fait sans dit." So the quote, loosely translated, means where there's a will, there's a way. And for those people like myself that know a little bit more French in depth, it actually means little by little, the bird builds its nest. Little by little, the bird builds its nest. And there's a story about a little bird who had 100 flights back and forth, carrying a little bit of straw, carrying a little bit of hair, carrying a feather, and slowly building its nest. And everyone looked on and said, he's never going to be successful. And slowly, eventually, the bird built its nest on time. So when I look at what we're trying to do and how we're going to accomplish it, it's actually about our community, little by little, building a nest for our children. And what I'd like to tell you about today is even some of the people here today, I'd like to point out the steps that they've been taking to build this community and build this nest for our children. And being here in Quebec, I'd be remiss if I didn't start with Anne-Marie and Maxime. If you guys could stand up for a second. Oh, you have to stand all the way up. They're one of the first people that we met dealing with Prader-Willi syndrome here in Quebec. And they have a beautiful 4-year-old now, Coralie. And they've been huge advocates directly for Coralie. And the difference that they've made in her life has been unbelievable. But in addition to that, they've actually gone above and beyond and created what is now the Association Prader-Willi Syndrome Quebec, and really with the mission to empower all of the families in Quebec to make a difference in their children's lives. And they've run countless fundraisers from spaghetti dinners and golf tournaments, really all with that same vision. So, Maxime and Anne-Marie, thank you very much for everything you guys have done for the community. So building that nest, one step at a time. Next, I'd actually like to ask Ria to stand up. So Ria is a little bit of Miss Everything for the Prader-Willi syndrome community. She's got a scientific background, and she's actually done a lot of research reviewing for our research projects. She was actually the one who led the translation of our websites, multiple websites, into French, so that we can actually start to get the information out into the French community. And on top of that, she actually ran our Scotiabank One Small Step Walk in Quebec as well. So she's been doing the fundraising, she's been pushing on the research, and in addition, and the people who don't deal with Prader-Willi syndrome may not know, but getting access to growth hormone can be a big issue across Canada. And Ria has been helping to really lead the charge to see what we can do to engage some of the stakeholders and start to make a difference in that. So, Ria, thank you very much for everything that you do. So related to that, I'd actually like to ask Dr. Deal to stand up. Sherry Deal. And so Sherry has been, I just actually had the chance to meet Sherry 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago. And it was actually originally from the introduction through Ria. But as I said, growth hormone is one of the most important treatments for our children, but it can be a complicated issue in terms of how you manage it, the pros and the cons, and managing the treatment across the whole life cycle of the life of our children that grow into adults. And Sherry was actually the one who took the lead and brought, I think it was about 35.
Actually, we were 52 in the end.
52 of literally the leading researchers, clinicians, Prader-Willi syndrome experts, industry experts, and growth hormone experts together here in Montreal to sit down and, as Sherry would say, lock them in a room for a couple days and really hash out what we're going to do related to growth hormone. How are we going to treat with it? What's the common practice that we're going to use to help our children? So it is a huge initiative that's helping people across Canada, but also even the world. And thank you so much for everything that you've done for our children. And as we keep building the nest, I'd be remiss if I didn't actually ask Michelle and Manny Cordiero to stand up. So Michelle and Manny are co-founders of the foundation. They drove out here from Toronto, and they've also ran and started the gala in Toronto that's actually now been running for 5 years. And this gala, over the last 5 years, has actually had 2,000 people attend who are raising money for Prader-Willi syndrome. And in addition to that, and sitting on our board, and Michelle has actually been our operations director, so she actually makes sure that we pay our bills on time and that we send tax receipts to all of our fantastic donors. So guys, you've done an amazing job for the community and for the foundation. Thank you very much. And as we continue to build the nest, the last people that I actually like to ask to stand up here today, are Marco and Carol. Where are they? Marco and Carol. So I had the pleasure of meeting Marco and Carol probably in April. So it was actually at the gala in Toronto. And I think they had actually recently just got the diagnosis. And right away after getting the diagnosis, as Carol mentioned, they wanted to understand what was going on and start to make a difference. So they drove out to Toronto to come to our gala. And since then, they've been just on an amazing tear. Not just advocating for Juliana and taking care of her, but on top of that, within that time, this is all within the first year, they've also run a walkathon, and now they're actually hosting a gala here today. And it's just unbelievable, and for me, it's so inspirational to see a family like yourselves to be able to go from getting a diagnosis to doing something for their child, and now doing something for the community. And guys, what I can tell you is, not only is what you're doing instrumental in us building this nest for the community and helping us get to the point where we create new treatments, and we will, but what you guys are doing for Juliana in setting an example of, if you have a problem, then take that small step and fight for it and make a difference is so inspirational. And on top of that, if everyone doesn't know already, today is actually Juliana's first birthday. So, happy birthday, Juliana. And guys, thank you so much for everything that you did. Petit à petit, leçon fait son dit. Thank you. But it's been amazing how quickly these small steps have started to add up. And just in this last year, within this year, we have run walks in 50 cities around the world in 7 different countries, including Canada and the US, the UK, Belgium, Germany, and France. And on top of that, just recently, we actually announced a donation that we received from the estate of Jean Deliage. I don't know if there seems to be a French theme here, but they actually made a donation of $500,000 to the foundation to carry on in the spirit. There's also a researcher, again from France, Dr. Taubert, who we funded, who's looking at some amazing, she's got some very early results, but still interesting in terms of using oxytocin, which is kind of known as the trust drug. And she's shown that it actually improves behavior in people with PWS. So she's now looking to take that to the next level. And there's a Canadian researcher who we funded probably about $100,000 over the years from Alberta, Dr. Weverick, who has yet unpublished results. But it looks like, and it's interesting, so she still needs to prove it out, but she thinks she may have actually started to find the area where the excessive hunger is coming from. And this is all these small steps starting to add up. So to close out, what I'd like to do is I'd like to share with you my second favorite quote in French. And it's probably just to show my wife that I actually do know 2 quotes. And it says, "Il est bon d'avoir des amis partout." It is good to have friends everywhere. And what you may not realize is by you being here today, you are now our friends. You are now part of the PWS community. By donating, you are actually allowing us to fund the researchers to move forward. By buying the raffle tickets and buying the silent auction tickets, you guys are allowing us to go out and find the answers that our children so desperately need and so desperately deserve. And by being here today, you are allowing us to take a step forward. Petit à petit, leçon fait son nid. Thank you so much for being a part of our event, and thank you so much for building that nest for little Juliana and my son Dante and all of the people with Prader-Willi syndrome.